Your father's wheelchair ramp violates Cedar Glen community standards. You have 48 hours to remove it, or the HOA will begin enforcement. Lee. Karen Whitmore said it from the edge of my driveway with an orange notice in one hand and a clipboard in the other, her voice clean, practiced, and certain in the way people sound when no one has ever made them show the paperwork. I took the notice. I read Rule 14. I did not argue. What she did not know was that the county permit was already signed, the inspection had already passed, the doctor's letter was already submitted, and the board vote she kept threatening me with did not exist. My doorbell camera had also recorded her reading the county permit sticker before she covered it. Here is what that meant in plain terms. Karen had the title, the clipboard, and the threat, but not the authority. By the time the board meeting ended, my dad's ramp was approved in writing. Every fine was canceled, and Karen lost the power to issue notices at all. Let me back up. My name is Mark Ellison, and at 62 years old, I thought I had already learned the difference between a real rule and a person who just liked giving orders. Then Karen Whitmore walked up my driveway with a clipboard. I did not know it yet, but the paper on that clipboard had been printed before the county inspector even finished signing off on my father's ramp. It was a Tuesday morning in Cedar Glen Estates, one of those quiet North Carolina neighborhoods where the loudest sound before 8 o'clock was usually a sprinkler clicking across somebody's lawn. The sun had just cleared the roofs across the street. My coffee was still sitting on the porch rail, turning cold, because I had both hands on my father's wheelchair. My dad, Ray Ellison, was 84 6 months earlier. He had missed the bottom step on our front porch and gone down hard on the concrete walkway. Broken hip, 3 weeks in rehab, a pride that hurt worse than the bone. After that, he stopped asking to go outside. He used to be the kind of man who could fix anything with a crescent wrench and a little patience. He built half the shelves in my garage, taught me how to frame a wall, and never paid another man to change his oil. But after the fall, he would sit by the front window in his flannel shirt, looking out at the maple tree like the porch belonged to somebody else. So I built the ramp. Not fancy, not ugly either. Treated lumber, solid handrails, clean slope, non-slip strips, everything measured twice. I hired a licensed contractor for the final build because I wanted it done right. Before the first board went down, I went to the county office, filled out the paperwork, paid the fee, and got the permit. I also emailed the permit packet and my father's doctor's mobility letter to Cedar Glen Property Management, asking for expedited architectural review under the safety access provision in RCC. I did not have final HOA approval yet, but the rules allowed emergency health and access modifications to be installed first when delay created a safety risk, as long as the homeowner submitted documentation afterward. And I had submitted everything. The county inspector came out the day after the ramp was finished. He checked the slope, the rail height, the landing, the fasteners, and the transition at the bottom. Then he signed off and placed the approval sticker inside the front rail, right where it could be seen from the walkway. That morning was the first time Dad rolled down it without anyone lifting him. When we reached the bottom, he looked back at the porch and gave a small laugh. "Well," he said, tapping the arm of his wheelchair, "I guess I am mobile again." I cannot explain what that did to me. It was not dramatic. He did not cry. I did not make a speech, but for the first time in months, my father looked less like a man trapped inside his own house. He asked me to stop halfway back up so he could feel the morning air. That was when Karen appeared. Karen Whitmore had been president of the Cedar Glen HOA for 3 years, though she carried herself like she had been appointed governor of the entire county. She wore a cream blazer, pearl earrings, pressed slacks, and shoes too clean for a woman walking across somebody else's yard. Her hair was sprayed into place. Her phone was already in her hand. The clipboard was tucked against her chest like a badge. She did not say good morning to my father. She did not ask how he was doing. She lifted her phone and took a picture of the ramp, then another. Then one of the handrails, then one of the landing. I kept my voice even. "Karen, can I help you?" She lowered the phone, just enough to look at me over the top of it. "You can start by explaining why this structure was built without board approval." Dad's fingers in slightly on the arms of his wheelchair. I stepped in front of him, not aggressively, just enough that Karen would have to talk to me instead of over him. "It's a wheelchair ramp," I said, "for my father. The county permitted it, and I submitted the documents to management." Karen gave the kind of smile people use when they have already decided not to listen. "That may be your opinion, Mark, but in this community, exterior modifications require architectural approval. It's not my opinion." I pointed to the inside rail. "The county permit sticker is right there, and the CCRS allows safety access modifications pending review." She glanced at the sticker for half a second. Then, she looked back at her clipboard. The HOA is not the county, no, I said, but the county inspected it, and this is a safety accommodation. Karen clicked her pen again. That is something you can explain at the hearing. What hearing? The compliance hearing. I looked down at the clipboard. I could see an orange sheet clipped to the front, already filled out. You came here with a notice already written? Really? Karen did not answer directly. She stepped around me, walked to the rail, and peeled a strip from the back of the orange paper. Before I could even ask what she was doing, she pressed the violation notice onto the ramp railing, right over the county permit sticker. Dad made a sound behind me, not loud, just a tired little breath through his nose. That made me angrier than the paper, but I did not raise my voice. I had worked enough years around contractors, inspectors, and angry homeowners to know that the first person who starts shouting usually becomes the easiest person to dismiss. So I took out my phone and photographed the notice. Karen, watch me do it. That one and help you, she said. I am just keeping a record. You have 48 hours to remove the unapproved structure. I looked at her. The ramp? The unauthorized structure, she corrected. The board cannot allow every homeowner to start building whatever they want in front of their house. My father needs this to leave the house safely. Karen shifted her eyes toward Dad for the first time. There was no sympathy in her face, only impatience. We all have personal circumstances, Mr. Ellison. Community standards apply to everyone. Dad looked down at his lap. That was the moment I understood. This was not about lumber. It was not about railings or paint color or setback lines. Karen was standing in my driveway telling an 84-year-old man that his ability to get outside was less important than her idea of what the neighborhood should look like. I took one slow breath. Show me the written authority, I said. Karen blinked. The rule, the board vote, the architectural decision, whatever you relying on. I want it in writing. She tapped the orange notice with her fingernail. It's right there. I leaned closer and read the printed line. Violation. Exterior structure constructed without approval. Reference. Architectural Rule 14B. Action required. Removal within 48 hours. Rule 14B. Something about that bothered me immediately. I had read the HOA packet when I bought the house 4 years earlier. Not because I enjoyed it. Nobody enjoys reading HOA documents. But after dealing with permits most of my adult life, I had learned one thing. The boring pages are usually where the truth hides. I remembered rules about paint colors, fences, sheds, satellite dishes, and landscaping. I remembered Architectural Rule 14 because it talked about decorative exterior additions visible from the street. But 14, that did not sound familiar. I looked up. Can you give me a copy of Rule 14B? Karen's smile thinned. You'll receive everything through the proper process. So you don't have it with you? I don't need to stand here and debate bylaws in your driveway. I am not debating. I am asking what rule I violated. She lifted her phone again and started recording me for the record. She said, her voice suddenly louder. The homeowner is refusing to comply with an official HOA notice. I looked straight at the phone for the record. I am asking for the written rule and the board authorization before removing a permitted wheelchair ramp for my disabled father. Karen lowered the phone for just a second. Her expression changed. Not fear exactly, more like irritation that I had not played the part she expected. Maybe she wanted me to yell. Maybe she wanted Dad upset on camera. Maybe she wanted a clip she could show the board and say, see, this is why we need enforcement. Instead, all she had was me asking for paperwork. She turned back toward the sidewalk. You have 48 hours, Mark, and if I don't remove it? She stopped at the edge of the driveway and looked over her shoulder. Then the fines begin, and if you keep ignoring the board, the HOA has other remedies. What remedies? Her smile returned. You can explain that at the hearing. Then she walked away, already tumming on her phone before she reached the street. Few seconds, I just stood there beside the ramp, listening to the wheels of Dad's chair shift softly against the boards. He finally said, maybe we should put it in the back. I turned around. No, he would not look at me. I don't want trouble. I know this is your house too. Mark, I don't want them coming after you because of me. I crouched beside his chair so he had to see my face. Dad, this ramp is not trouble. It's your way out of the house. His jaw tightened. He nodded once, but I could tell Karen had already done damage. Not to the ramp, to him. I helped him back inside, made sure he was settled in his recliner, and told him I was going to check the file. The file was in the bottom drawer of my desk, in a blue folder labeled ramp permit. Inside were the documents I had kept because old habits die hard. The contractor's estimate, the county application, the receipt, the permit approval, the final inspection sign-off, the doctor's letter, and the email I had sent to property management. Everything was there. Then I pulled out the HOA packet from the shelf, Cedar Glen Estates Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, Architectural Guidelines, Board Procedures. I turned to Section 14, There was Rule 14A, then Section 15, no 14B. I went back and checked again. Still no 14. At first I thought, maybe Karen had just used an old version, or maybe there had been an amendment I missed. That would have been annoying, but possible. So I checked the amendment pages. Nothing. I checked the HOA website. Still nothing. By then my coffee had gone completely cold. I walked back outside and stood in front of the ramp. The orange violation notice was still stuck to the rail, covering half of the county sticker beneath it, and that was when I noticed something else. The date on Karen's notice was not today's date. It had been printed 3 days earlier, before the county inspection was even complete, before Karen had ever walked up my driveway, before she pretended this was just a routine violation. I stood there, looking at that orange paper, feeling the whole morning shift under my feet. At first I thought Karen had misunderstood the ramp. Then I realized she had been planning to target it before she even knew whether it was legal. And the rule she cited had one problem: it did not exist. By noon, I had the orange notice in one hand and the HOA packet in the other. I read Section 14 3 times. There was still no Rule 14. That should have made me feel better, but it did not. People like Karen Whitmore do not need to be right to cause damage. They only need enough confidence to scare decent people into giving up before the truth catches up. And my father was already scared. Dad sat in his recliner by the front window, pretending to read the newspaper. He had been on the same page for 20 minutes every few seconds. His eyes moved from the paper to the ramp outside. "You sure they can make us tear it down?" he asked. "I am sure they can make us tear it down today." He looked at me over the top of his glasses. That's not the same thing. No, it was not. I wanted to tell him everything would be fine, but at 62, you learn not to make promises before you have the paperwork to back them up. So I made a folder. The county permit went in first, then the inspection approval, then the contractor invoice, then the doctor's letter, then the email I had sent to management, then the photographs I had taken of Karen's notice covering the permit sticker. After that, I printed the HOA rules from the Cedar Glen website. Section 14 was there, just like my old packet showed. Section 15 came right after it. No 14B. At 4:18 that afternoon, the first email arrived. Subject line: immediate compliance required unauthorized exterior structure. It was from the Cedar Glen HOA Management Office, but Karen was copied at the top. The email said I had 48 hours to remove the ramp or face a $250 initial fine, followed by $100 per day for continuing non-compliance. It also said unpaid fines could be referred for collection remedies, including lien review after proper notice and board action. That phrase was doing a lot of work. Lien review. It was not an actual lien yet, but it was written to sound like the first step toward one. And that was exactly the point. Lien review sounds official enough to frighten a homeowner, especially an older one, especially one caring for his disabled father. But I had read enough contracts to notice what was missing. No hearing date, no appeal instructions, no copy of the rule, no board minutes, no vote count, no statement that my expedited safety access request had even been reviewed. Just Karen's violation number and a deadline. I replied with one sentence. Please provide the specific written rule, the board vote authorizing enforcement, the status of my submitted safety access documentation, and the appeal procedure before any fine is assessed. Then I saved the email as a PDF. The next morning Karen came back. This time she did not come alone. I saw her through the front window standing near the sidewalk with two neighbors, Mrs. Delaney from across the street and a man named Bruce who walked his little white dog past our house every morning. Karen was not whispering. She wanted me to hear. Worse than that, she wanted Dad to hear. "We all feel bad for Mr. Ellison," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "But once one homeowner ignores architectural standards, everyone else thinks they can do whatever they want," she said. My father's name loud enough for him to hear through the front window. Dad heard it. His face changed before he even looked at me. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. "Karen," I said, "do not discuss my father's medical situation with the neighborhood." She turned with that polished little smile. "I didn't mention anything private. You are standing in front of his ramp, talking about him loudly enough for 3 houses to hear." Mrs. Delaney looked down at her shoes. Bruce pulled his dog closer and suddenly became very interested in the curb. Karen lifted her clipboard. "This would all be easier if you complied. I asked for the rule, you received the notice. I asked for the board vote. You'll receive what you re-entitled to receive. That's not an answer." Her smile faded. "Mark, the board has already reviewed this. You're only making it worse for yourself." I looked at the ramp. Then I looked back at her. "What date did the board review it?" She blinked once. "The board does not have to explain its internal process on your front lawn." "No, but if you re-fining me based on a board decision, there should be minutes." Karen's eyes hardened. You can explain your attitude at the hearing. What hearing? You still haven't given me a date. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Karen raised her phone and started recording. This is exactly the kind of hostile behavior the board is concerned about. I did not move toward her. I did not raise my voice. I just pointed to my own doorbell camera above the porch. Mine records too. Her phone lowered a few inches. That was the first time I saw her confidence slip, only for a second. Then she turned and walked away, telling Mrs. Delaney, "Some people think rules are optional when they have a sad story." Dad did not come outside that day. At 2:06 p.m. my phone rang from a number. I did not recognize Mr. Ellison. "This is Paula from Cedar Glen Property Management." Her voice sounded careful, like she knew the call might be recorded even if nobody said so. "I received your email, requesting documentation," she said. "I am gathering what I can." "What does that mean?" A pause. "It means I have the violation notice," Karen submitted. "I also found your earlier email with the permit packet and doctor's letter. Was it forwarded to the architectural committee?" Another pause. "I am checking that, and the board vote." "I haven't seen any board vote on this." I stood very still. "Can you repeat that?" I said. "I haven't seen a board vote." "That does mean one does exist. It may not have been uploaded yet." "Is there a hearing scheduled?" "Not yet, but the email threatens fines in 48 hours. "I understand. Can fines be assessed before a hearing?" Paula exhaled softly. "Normally the homeowner is given notice and an opportunity to be heard." "Normally I'm not the board, Mr. Ellison?" "No, she was not, and she clearly did not want to be pulled under the bus." Karen was driving. After the call ended, I wrote down the time, the number, and every sentence I could remember. Then I saved the voicemail. Karen had left 2 hours later. Her message was short. "Mark, refusing to communicate through proper HOA channels will not help you. If that structure is still there, Friday morning, the association will proceed." She did not say ramp. She kept calling it that structure. Like refusing to name it made my father disappear from the issue. Friday morning, the association proceeded. At 8:30, a white pickup stopped in front of my house with a magnetic sign on the door. It was Cedar Glen Maintenance Services. A man in a gray work shirt stepped out, looked at the ramp, then looked at the house like he already regretted the job. Karen arrived 2 minutes later in her silver SUV. Dad was at the window again. I stepped outside before she reached the porch. "Who is this?" Karen checked her phone. "The association sent someone to assess removal." The man raised both hands slightly. "Just assessment," he said. "I'm not removing anything right now." Karen shot him a look. I asked him, "Did she tell you this is a permitted wheelchair ramp?" He looked at Karen. "No, sir. I was told it was an unapproved wooden structure." I pulled the folder from under my arm and showed him the permit copy, the inspection sign-off, and my email to management. He read the first page. Then he looked at the inspection approval. "Yeah," he said slowly. I am not touching this." Karen's head snapped toward him. "You were hired by the HOA. I was asked to look at a removal job," he said. "I am not removing a permitted accessibility ramp from private property without written authorization, board documentation, and legal clearance." Karen's face went tight. "The board authorized enforcement." "Then, I'd need to see that in writing." I almost laughed, but I did not. The maintenance guy had just asked the same question I had been asking for 3 days. Karen did not answer him either. Instead, she called the police. The officer arrived 20 minutes later. His name was Officer Briggs. He was polite, tired, and clearly not excited to spend his morning standing between an HOA president and a wheelchair ramp. Karen spoke first. "This homeowner is refusing a lawful HOA enforcement action." Officer Briggs looked at the ramp. Then he looked at me. "Sir, do you live here?" "Yes." "Is this your property?" "Yes." "Do you have documentation for the ramp?" I handed him the county permit, inspection approval, and the email showing I had sent the documents to management. He read them carefully. Then he looked at Karen. "Ma'am, this appears to be a civil HOA dispute. I'm not ordering him to remove a permitted ramp today." Karen's voice sharpened. "So the police are allowing him to violate community rules?" I am saying, "I am not here to enforce HOA architectural rules. He is obstructing association enforcement." Officer Briggs looked at the maintenance man. "Were you asked to remove this ramp?" The man nodded carefully. "Asked to assess it, but I'm not touching it without paperwork." The officer turned back to Karen. "If anyone enters private property and starts dismantling a large part of this residence without clear legal authority, that could create a separate issue." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had nothing polished ready. Officer Briggs gave me an incident number and told both of us to keep communication documented. Then he left. The maintenance man left right after him. Karen stayed at the end of my driveway for a few seconds, staring at the ramp like it had personally betrayed her. Then she said something low enough that I almost missed it. "You should have just asked permission." I looked at her. "I asked for review. I asked for the rule, I asked for the vote. She got into her SUV and slammed the door that afternoon. Another HOA email arrived. This one said my continued refusal to comply would be reviewed at an emergency board session. But attached to the email was a PDF Karen must not have looked at closely. It was labeled Architectural Enforcement Summary. At the bottom, under board authorization, there were 3 blank lines. No signatures, no vote count, no quorum noted, and the rule cited was still 14B. That was when I stopped treating it like a ramp dispute. Because Karen had not just skipped a step, she was building an entire case on a rule that did not exist, a vote nobody could show me, a permit she had tried to cover with orange paper, and an appeal process she had not followed. And now, for the first time, she had put the blanks in writing. That night, I spread every document across my kitchen table. The county permit sat on the left, the HOA packet sat on the right between them, where Karen asked orange violation notice. The enforcement email, the blank authorization form, my earlier email to property management, and my handwritten notes from the phone call with Paula. Dad sat at the table with me for a while, one hand resting on his cane. He looked smaller than he used to. That bothered me more than Karen's fines. For most of my life, my father had been the man other people called when something broke. A door hinge, a mower belt, a leaking pipe under the sink. Ray Ellison did not ask for help unless he had no other choice. Now, he was sitting in his own kitchen, wondering whether a woman with a clipboard could take away the one thing that let him leave the house safely. "Mark," he said quietly, "maybe we should just move it to the back." I kept my eyes on the papers. "No," he sighed, "I don't want you spending money on lawyers because of me. This is not because of you." He looked at the orange notice. "Feels like it is." That was the moment. I stopped reading like a homeowner and started reading like someone building a timeline. Karen had counted on emotion, embarrassment, pressure, my father feeling like a burden, me getting angry enough to make a mistake, so I did the one thing she clearly did not expect. I got organized first. I numbered every document. 1, the county permit application. 2, the permit approval. 3, the final inspection sign-off. The contractor's invoice. 5, the doctor's mobility letter. 6, my email to property management requesting expedited safety access review. 7, photographs of the approval sticker on the ramp before Karen covered it. 8, Karen's violation notice citing Rule 14B. 9, the HOA architectural rules showing Rule 14B did not exist. 10, the enforcement email threatening fines before any hearing. 11, the PDF with blank board authorization lines. 12, my notes from Paula's call. 13, the police incident number from Officer Briggs. By the time I reached number 13, the ramp was no longer just a ramp. It was a paper trail Karen had not expected me to keep. Then I opened the Cedar Glen CCRs again and started reading from the beginning. Not skimming, reading, the boring parts, the definitions, the notice requirements, the appeal language, the board procedure. That was where the first real crack appeared. Section 9 covered architectural changes. It did say exterior modifications visible from the street required review. Karen had not invented that part. But Section 9 also said an owner had the right to request expedited review for safety-related modifications. And Section 11 said fines could not be assessed until the homeowner received written notice and an opportunity to be heard. Karen had skipped straight to punishment. Then I found the part that made me sit back in my chair. Emergency health and access modifications could be installed before final architectural approval when delay would create a safety risk, as long as the homeowner submitted documentation afterward. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I printed it. The next morning, I drove to the county permit office. It was a low brick building behind the courthouse with faded parking lines and a flag that snapped in the wind hard enough to sound like a warning. I brought the whole folder with me, even though I only needed the permit copy. A woman at the counter looked up when I gave her the permit number. "Residential ramp?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She typed for a moment. "Front entry accessibility ramp. Final inspection passed. Can I get a certified copy of that?" She looked at me over her glasses. "Has trouble?" I almost smiled. "That obvious happens more than you'd think." She printed the permit record, stamped it, and called back to an inspector named Dale Mercer. Dale came out wearing work boots and a county jacket with a coffee stain near the pocket. He was not dramatic. He did not act like he had walked into a movie. He just looked through my paperwork and nodded. "I inspected this one," he said. "Good build, proper slope. Handrails were solid." "Can the HOA say it's unsafe?" He shrugged. "They can have architectural opinions. They can change my inspection record by calling it unsafe." That sentence went straight into my notes. Then he pointed to the violation photo. "She covered the permit sticker?" "Yes." "With her notice?" "Yes." He looked at the picture for a long second. "I keep that. I planned to before I left." Dale printed a second page, showing no complaint had been filed with the county before Karen issued the notice that mattered. Karen had told the officer the ramp was unsafe, but she had never reported a safety issue to the agency that actually inspected it. Back home, I had a voicemail waiting from Paula. Mr. Ellison, this is Paula from Cedar Glen Property Management. I am sending the latest board minutes you requested. I still don't see a recorded vote specific to your ramp. I've asked Karen to provide any emergency authorization she is referring to. I also confirmed your permit packet was received before the violation notice was issued. I played it twice, then I saved it in 3 places. The board minutes arrived by email 20 minutes later. There had been a landscaping discussion, a complaint about trash cans, a budget item for pool maintenance, a reminder about holiday decorations, nothing about my ramp, nothing about Dad, nothing about an emergency enforcement action. But there was one more detail that mattered. Cedar Glen had 7 board members. The bylaws required 4 present for quorum. The so-called emergency review Karen mentioned had no posted notice. No agenda, no motion, no vote count, and no signatures. And according to the meeting calendar Paula included with the board records, the only board-related meeting that week was a compliance prep call between Karen and one other board member. 2 people. Not 4, not a quorum, not a board vote. I was writing that down when Mrs. Delaney knocked on the door. She stood on the porch holding a casserole dish with both hands, looking embarrassed. Before she said a word, I am sorry about yesterday, she said. I stepped outside and pulled the door partly closed behind me, so Dad would not hear everything. You to owe me a casserole, Mrs. Delaney? No, she said, but I owe you the truth. She looked toward Karen's house at the end of the block. She did something like this to Howard Bell last year. After his knee surgery, he put in a temporary rail by his front steps. Karen told everyone it was unapproved. He took it down because he didn't want trouble. Was there a board vote? Mrs. Delaney gave a sad little laugh with Karen. There's always a board vote until someone asks to see it. That was how I found Linda Park. Mrs. Delaney gave me her number. Linda had been Cedar Glen's board secretary for 9 years before Karen became president, and pushed her out during what Linda called the clipboard takeover. I called her that afternoon. Linda listened without interrupting, while I explained the ramp, the notice, Rule 14B, the blank authorization form, and Paula's voicemail. Then she said, ask for the minutes. I did. Ask for the notice of meeting. I don't think there was one. Then ask for the quorum record. There were only 2 people on the prep call. Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Cedar Glen requires 4 for quorum. If there was no notice, no quorum, no motion, and no minutes, then Karen did not have a board vote. She had a conversation. I wrote that down word for word. Linda offered to come to the hearing, not because she knew my father. She had never met him, but because, as she put it, Karen has been using older resident silence as her enforcement policy. That line stayed with me. By Friday evening, I had one more piece, the doorbell camera. I had almost forgotten about it because I already knew Karen covered the permit sticker. But when I pulled up the footage from the morning she first came to the house, I saw something I had missed. Karen walked to the ramp. She photographed the handrail. Then she leaned in close to the county permit sticker. The camera caught her face turning toward it. She saw it. There was no question. She stood there for almost 4 seconds, reading the sticker, before she reached for the orange violation notice. Then she placed her notice directly over it, not beside it, not below it, over it. And while she pressed the paper flat, the microphone picked up her muttering one sentence under her breath. County doesn't run this neighborhood. I sat at my desk and played that line again. Then I exported the clip. By the time the board hearing arrived, my folder had become a binder. Tabs, dates, printed emails, permit records, CCR sections, board procedures, photos, voicemails transcribed, doorbell footage saved on a flash drive. Dad watched me put it all together at the kitchen table. You sure you want to go through with this? He asked. I zipped that binder closed. No, I said, but I am sure I am not letting her lie about you. The hearing was scheduled for Monday night at the Cedar Glen Community Center. Karen thought. I was walking in to ask forgiveness, but I had the permit, the missing quorum, the voicemail, the camera footage, and the woman who used to write the minutes. And Karen had one problem she still did not understand. Paper remembers what power tries to erase. The Cedar Glen Community Center smelled like old coffee, floor polish, and nervous neighbors. I arrived 15 minutes early with my binder under one arm and a flash drive in my shirt pocket. Linda Park walked in beside me, carrying a slim folder of her own. She was in her 70s, sharp-eyed and calm in the way people get when they have already seen every version of a bully. Dad wanted to come. I told him, no, not because I was ashamed of him, Because Karen had already used his condition once, and I was not giving her a room full of people to do it again. He watched me leave from the front window, the same window he had been trapped behind for months before the ramp. "Don't get mad," he told me. "I won T. Don't let her make you small either." That stayed with me all the way to the meeting. Karen was already at the front table when I walked in, cream blazer, pearl earrings, clipboard placed perfectly in front of her. She had arranged the room like a courtroom where she was both prosecutor and judge. 3 board members sat beside her. The treasurer, a quiet man named Alan Reeves, kept flipping through papers with a frown. Paula from the management company sat near the wall with a laptop, looking like she would rather be anywhere else. At the end of the table, a small conference speaker blinked green. Paula said. The HOA attorney was dialed in to answer procedural questions. About 20 neighbors had shown up. Karen had made sure of that. I heard the whispers as I took my seat. That's the ramp guy, isn't it? For his father, I heard he refused to follow the rules. I opened my binder and said nothing at 7 o'clock. Karen tapped her pen against the table. "We re-here tonight to address an ongoing architectural violation at the Ellison property," she said. "Mr. Ellison constructed a large exterior structure without prior approval and has refused multiple opportunities to comply." She looked around the room, letting the words settle. Cedar Glen cannot allow emotional exceptions to override community standards. There it was again. Emotional exceptions, not safety, not access, not my father's dignity, just an exception. Karen wanted the room to resent. She turned to me. "Mr. Ellison, you may explain why you ignored the architectural process." I stood slowly. "I didn't ignore the process," I said. "I followed the part that applied to an urgent safety modification, submitted my documents to management, and asked for expedited review. I'm asking this board to follow its own process too." Karen's smile tightened. "You were instructed to remove the structure." "I was instructed by you," I said, "not by a valid board vote." The room shifted a little. Karen leaned toward the microphone. The board reviewed the matter. I opened my binder. "Then I'd like to see the meeting notice, the quorum record, the motion, the vote count, and the minutes." Alan Reeves stopped flipping pages. Karen's eyes moved to him, then back to me. "That documentation is internal." Linda Parks spoke from beside me. "No, it is Karen's face changed. "Linda, you're not on the board anymore." "No," Linda said, "but I wrote those minutes for 9 years. If the board fined a homeowner, there should be a record." A murmur moved through the room. Karen tapped her pen again. "Harder this time, Mr. Ellison. This is your hearing, not Miss Parks." "Good," I said. "Then I'll start with your notice." I walked to the front table and placed a copy of the orange violation notice in front of each board member. "This is what Karen Agren taped to my father's wheelchair ramp. It cites Architectural Rule 14B. Karen lifted her chin. "Yes, I placed the printed architectural guidelines beside it. This is the current rulebook from the HOA website. Section 14 has one rule, 14. After that, it goes to Section 15. Alan picked up the pages. I continued. "There is no Rule 14B in the packet I received when I bought the house. There is no Rule 14B in the online copy. And there is no amendment creating Rule 14 in the documents Paula sent me." Paula looked down at her laptop. Karen cut in. "The board has discretion to interpret the guidelines. Interpretation is different from inventing a rule," I said. That was the first time someone in the back of the room said, "Wow." Karen heard it. Her voice sharpened. "The issue is not one technical citation. The issue is that you built without approval." I turned to the next tab. "This is the county permit." I placed the stamped copy on the table. "This is the final inspection approval." Another page. "This is the contractor invoice." Another page. "This is my email to management submitting the permit packet and asking for expedited safety access review." Another page. "This is the limited doctor's mobility letter my father allowed me to submit, confirming the ramp was medically necessary because he could no longer safely use the front steps." Karen leaned back. "The Hovis County." "No," I said, "and I am not claiming a county permit erases every HOA rule that made the room quieter," I continued. "The permit does not decide paint color. It does not decide architectural preference. But it destroys the claim that this ramp was illegal, unsafe, or subject to emergency removal before a proper hearing." Alan looked down at the permit again. "You told the police the ramp was unsafe," I said. "The county inspector who approved it disagreed." I read from Dale Mercer's note: "Front entry accessibility ramp. Final inspection passed. Proper slope, handrails, secure." Alan rubbed his forehead. Karen looked toward Paula. Paula did not look back. I turned another page. "The CCs do require review for exterior modifications. I am not pretending they don't, but Section 9 allows expedited treatment for safety-related access modifications. Section 11 says fines require written notice and an opportunity to be heard before assessment." I looked at the board. "I received a fine threat before any hearing date, before any appeal instructions. before anyone provided the rule I supposedly violated, and before anyone answered the expedited review request I had already submitted. Karen, stop moving. Then I took out the PDF labeled Architectural Enforcement Summary. This form was attached to the HOA's own email. At the bottom, it has CITES for board authorization. I held it up. They read blank. Alan reached for his copy. No signatures, no vote count, no quorum, just empty lines. Karen said that form was preliminary. Then why was enforcement already happening? No answer. I moved to the next piece. Paula called me after I requested the board vote. I saved her message. Paula went pale. I looked at her. I'm not blaming you. You told the truth. Then, I played the voicemail from my phone. Paula's voice filled the room. I still don't see a recorded vote specific to your ramp. I've asked Karen to provide any emergency authorization she is referring to. I also confirmed your permit packet was received before the violation notice was issued. The room went silent. Not quiet silent. The kind of silence where even guilty people stop pretending they do not understand. Karen turned toward Paula. You had no right to say that. Paula closed her laptop halfway. I had no vote record to send him. Alan looked at Karen. Was there a vote? Karen's mouth tightened. There was an emergency compliance discussion. Linda Park said with quorum. Karen snapped. This is not your meeting, Alan said. Answer the question. That was when Karen lost the room. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But you could feel the air change. Neighbors who had come expecting to watch me apologize were now leaning forward. I took the flash drive from my pocket. There. As one more thing, Karen's eyes locked on the drive. I plugged it into Paula's laptop, and she connected it to the community center screen. The doorbell footage appeared. There was Karen on my front walkway. Same cream blazer, same clipboard, same phone. She walked to the ramp, took pictures, then leaned close to the county permit sticker. The video showed her pause, reading it. Then she peeled the backing off the orange violation notice and pressed it directly over the permit sticker. A few people in the room reacted out loud. Then the audio played. Karen's own voice came through the speaker, low but clear. County does a run this neighborhood. Nobody spoke. Karen stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. That was taken out of context. I looked at her. It's one continuous clip. You were recording me without permission. It's my front porch. Alan turned to Paula. Can we confirm that enforcement should be suspended? Before Paula could answer, the HOA attorney's voice came through the conference speaker on the table. I strongly recommend the board suspend all fines and removal efforts immediately pending review. Lee. Karen stared at the speaker like it betrayed her too. The attorney continued. If the ramp is permitted, inspected, medically necessary, and the association lacks a documented vote or proper hearing procedure. Lee. Continued enforcement creates unnecessary liability for the association. Karen tried one more time. We have to protect community standards. Alan looked at the blank authorization form in front of him. Karen, did the board vote to fine Mr. Ellison? She said nothing. He asked again. Did the board vote? Her face had gone pale under the makeup. We had an understanding, Linda Park said quietly. That is not a vote. Mrs. Delaney stood from the second row. You told me the board voted when Howard Bell put in his handrail last year. Karen turned toward her. That is not relevant. It is to me, Mrs. Delaney said. Howard took it down because he believed you. Another neighbor stood. You find my wife over a temporary step rail. After surgery, then another, you said. Emergency enforcement didn't need appeal. Karen looked around the room, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked outnumbered, not by anger, by memory, by paperwork, by people realizing they had each been told the same private version of a fake rule. Alan pushed Karen's folder back across the table. Until we review every enforcement notice issued under emergency authority. I am not signing anything else. The attorney's voice came through again. That would be wise. Karen sat down slowly. Her clipboard was still in front of her, but it no longer looked like a badge. It looked like evidence. I gathered my papers and zipped the binder closed. I had not shouted. I had not insulted her. I had not asked the room to feel sorry for my father. I had only shown them what Karen hoped. Nobody would ask to see the rule, the vote, the permit. The video. Karen walked into that room as the woman who controlled Cedar Glen. But by the time the screen went dark, even her own board treasurer would not look her in the eye. The meeting did not end with Karen being dragged out. Real life usually does not work that way. There were no handcuffs, no judge banging a gavel, no dramatic confession where the room gasped and everything was fixed before dinner. What happened was quieter, and somehow that made it feel heavier. Alan Reeves, the treasurer, asked for a 5-minute recess. Karen objected, but nobody backed her up. Not even the board member, who had been nodding along with her at the start of the meeting. People stood from their chairs, but nobody really left. They gathered in small groups near the back wall, whispering over paper cups of coffee. Mrs. Delaney stood beside Linda Park. Paula from the management company stayed at her laptop, typing quickly, probably making the cleanest record she had ever made in that room. Karen sat at the front table alone. Her clipboard was closed. For the first time since she walked onto my property, she had nothing to say. When the board came back, Alan cleared his throat. "Effective immediately," he said. "All fines and enforcement actions regarding the Ellison ramp are suspended pending review." Karen turned toward him. "You can do that without a full board vote." Alan looked directly at her. "Then let's have one." The room went still again. With 4 board members present, the quorum Karen had failed to produce earlier was finally real. He read the motion slowly, like he wanted every word recorded. To suspend all enforcement related to the Ellison accessibility ramp, remove all pending fines from the owner's account, suspend any removal assessment, and refer the matter to Association Council for procedural review. 1 board member seconded it. Karen did not, but she did not have enough votes to stop it either. The motion passed, 3-1. Then Alan read a second motion. Until council completes review, no violation notice may be issued under emergency authority without 2 board signatures. Karen's head snapped toward him. In pending that review, Alan continued, Karen Whitmore's authority to issue unilateral violation notices on behalf of the association is suspended. That was the moment the room truly understood what had happened. Karen had not just lost the ramp case. She had lost the tool she used to scare people. The motion passed again, 3-1 for the first time in almost a week. I felt my shoulders drop. Not because everything was over. It was not. But because the ramp was safe for the night. Dad would wake up the next morning and it would still be there. Alan looked at me. "Mr. Ellison, on behalf of the board, I apologize for how this was handled." Karen made a sound under her breath. Alan ignored her. "We will send written confirmation by tomorrow." I nodded. "Thank you." That was all I said. Because I had not come there to perform victory. I had come there to protect my father's way out of his own house. The written confirmation arrived the next afternoon. It canceled the violation notice. It removed the $250 initial fine. It confirmed no daily fines would be assessed. It confirmed no removal vendor would be sent. It stated that the ramp would remain in place while the HOA conducted a proper architectural review under the safety access provision of the CCRS. That last sentence mattered. The HOA was still trying to save face by calling it a review, but they were no longer calling it illegal. They were no longer calling it unsafe, and they were no longer pretending Karen had a valid board vote. 3 days later, Paula called again. This time her voice sounded different, less careful, more tired. "Mr. Ellison," she said, "the board has asked me to inform you that the review is complete. The ramp is approved as installed." I closed my eyes for a second. "Can you send that in writing?" I already did, of course she had. Paula had learned something from Karen too. Paper mattered. The email came through before the call ended. Attached to it was a formal approval letter, signed by Alan and another board member. It referenced the county permit, the inspection approval, the Dr. S letter, the safety access provision in the CCRS, and the fact that documentation had been submitted before the violation notice was issued. At the bottom was one sentence I printed and put in the binder. "No further enforcement action shall be taken regarding the approved accessibility ramp at the Ellison property." I brought the letter to Dad. He was sitting by the front window again. But this time the window was open. The spring air moved the curtains against the sill. "It's approved," I said. He looked up slowly. "In writing?" I smiled. "In writing." He took the paper from me and read it twice. His hands trembled a little, not from fear this time, just age. Then he said, "Your mother would have kept that in a frame. She kept everything in a frame." He laughed. It was the first real laugh I had heard from him since Karen taped that notice to the rail, but the board was not finished. Once neighbors started talking, the ramp stopped being the only issue. Howard Bell's daughter sent an email about the handrail Karen had pressured him to remove after his knee surgery. Another homeowner produced a fine notice for a temporary porch rail that had never gone before the board. A widow named Mrs. Kavanaugh said Karen threatened daily fines over a portable ramp her grandson used when visiting. Each story was a little different, but the pattern was the same. Karen called it emergency enforcement. Karen said the board had already reviewed it. Karen told people they could avoid trouble if they complied quickly, and almost nobody had asked for the minutes. 2 weeks after my hearing, Cedar Glen held a special meeting. This time the room was packed. Karen did not wear the cream blazer. She wore a dark blue jacket and sat stiffly at the front table with her hands folded together. No clipboard. No phone held up like a weapon. No authority to issue notices by herself. Alan opened with the attorney's findings. The HOA Council had reviewed 14 enforcement notices issued under emergency authority during Karen's presidency. 6 had incomplete documentation. 4 had no clear board authorization. 3 involved medical access or safety-related modifications. Nobody said the word fraud. Nobody needed to. The facts were bad enough. The attorney recommended changes immediately. All violation notices would require 2 board signatures. No fines could be assessed before written hearing notice and an appeal opportunity. Meeting minutes would be posted to the resident portal within 10 business days. Emergency enforcement would require documented safety risk, not one person's preference. Medical and accessibility modifications would be handled under a separate review process. Any resident who submitted safety or medical access documentation would receive written confirmation of review status within 5 business days. And no HOA representative could cover, remove, or obscure a county permit sticker on private property. That last one made half the room turn toward Karen. She stared straight ahead. Then came the no confidence motion. Karen tried to speak before the vote. "I have always acted to protect property values," she said. Mrs. Delaney stood from the second row. "You humiliated an old man over a ramp." Karen's mouth tightened. "That is not fair." Howard Bella's daughter stood next. "My father stopped going out on his front porch because of you." The room went quiet. Karen looked at the board, then at the neighbors, then down at the table. For once, she seemed to understand that the room was not afraid of her anymore. Before the vote was completed, she resigned, not gracefully, not with an apology. She read from a prepared statement about being misunderstood, about hostility toward volunteers, about how standards only work when enforced. Allen did not let that become the final word. "The board accepts your resignation," he said, "pending council's final review of all enforcement actions issued under your authority." Karen looked up. Allen kept his voice calm. "That means this matter is not being closed tonight as a misunderstanding." The room stayed silent. Karen folded the statement in half and placed it on the table, but her name came off the HOA office door that Friday. Allen became acting president until a new election could be held. Linda Park agreed to help rewrite the records process, though she made everyone promise she was not coming back to the board full-time. "I already survived one clipboard dictator," she told me. "I'm not looking for another career." As part of the board's internal resolution, the HOA reimbursed the consultation fee I had paid to a local attorney after the hearing. It was not a fortune, $200, but it mattered because it was the board admitting the fight should never have cost me anything. They also sent Dad a written apology. He read that one even slower than the approval letter. Then he folded it, placed it on the side table, and said, "That woman never did learn how to say sorry herself." "No," I said, "but the board did." A week later, Mrs. Delaney came over with another casserole. This time, Dad answered the door from the ramp. I stood behind him, letting him do it himself. She looked at him and said, "Ray, I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." Dad nodded. "You Ray speaking now," that was all he said. But Mrs. Delaney wiped her eyes anyway. After that, things changed in small ways. Neighbors waved more. People stopped lowering their voices when Karen's name came up. Howard Bell's daughter asked Allen about reinstalling her father's handrail, and this time the board approved it in one meeting. Mrs. Kavanaugh's grandson got his portable ramp cleared in writing before his next visit, and my father started going outside again. Not every day. Some mornings his hip hurt too much. Some mornings he was tired. But on warm afternoons, I would find him halfway down the ramp, parked in the shade with a glass of iced tea, watching the maple leaves move. The ramp never looked like rebellion to me. It looked like dignity. A few boards, 2 handrails, a county permit, and a promise I made to my mother that Dad would not spend the rest of his life trapped behind a window because leaving the house made someone else uncomfortable. Karen thought power was a clipboard. She thought authority was a title. She thought rules were whatever she could say loudly enough before anyone checked. But that old binder on my kitchen table proved something different. The strongest rule in that whole neighborhood was not hidden in Karen's clipboard. It was written in permits, minutes, inspection records, appeal rights, and the simple truth that private property does not stop being private just because someone with a title wants control. I did not beat Karen by shouting louder. I beat her by keeping every document she hoped no one would read, and my father beat her every time he rolled down that ramp into the sunlight. If you have ever seen an HOA cross the line with someone's home, driveway, ramp, or private property, drop your story in the comments. And if you believe homeowners should know their rights before a Karen tries to rewrite them, subscribe for the next property line justice story.